I want to start this video out today by sharing with you a clip that I came across, really putting that word into action in John 10 and 27, where Jesus says that his sheep know his voice and that we don't follow a stranger because that voice is not known by us, but only the Lord's. So let me play that real quick for you as I get into today's message. That shows us that in 1 Thessalonians, when it says we are supposed to test and prove all things, it shows us that it's possible to do that the more you get to know God's voice. I never really truly understood the power of that scripture until I became depressed. I was depressed for about 7 years, and it was major depression. God healed me from it. Y'all know my story. The very first thing he told me was to find out everything I could about him, and in that he would show me who I was and what my purpose is on this earth. After that moment, I went and I started diving into scripture, and every single day for about 3 months, with doing nothing else but taking care of my children and my husband, the only thing I would do is come to my table and I would read scripture all day, like for hours. I was literally living by God's voice because that was the thing that was preventing me from leaving this earth when I really wanted to. There are ways that God speaks to his people, and there are many different ways that God speaks to his people. He doesn't speak the same way for each person. Now, some of the ways that I have personally learned and experienced that God speaks to his people is through other people. So sometimes that can be a pastor, or sometimes that can be a friend or a spouse, different forms of media. So he can speak through movies, videos, music, symbols, numbers. He can also give you visions, dreams. Sometimes it's just a picture and it won't be you hearing him say something, but that is still a form of God speaking to you. He speaks through different circumstances, nature, and you can also hear him speak in your heart or your mind. I sort of look at that as being connected, because when I hear the voice of God, my heart is moving, even though I'm sort of hearing him in my head. It's this connection you can't really break. So I'm gonna just say through the heart and the mind is how he is speaking. Some have said that they have heard the voice of God audibly. And obviously in the Bible, he was speaking audibly to others, like especially in the Old Testament. But you don't have to hear the voice of God audibly. And you don't even have to desire that, because blessed is the one who believes and hasn't seen. I see that the same way when it comes to his voice. Blessed are you if you can hear God in your heart without having to hear him audibly, because that means that you are believing that he really is speaking to you versus having to have tangible proof that he's talking. Don't feel like you're missing out if you haven't had an extravagant experience with the Lord, with him taking you up into heaven and him leaving you there for a few hours and just talking to you like some of these people have said on videos and stuff like that. You don't have to feel like you're being left out, because you're more blessed if you hear him and you haven't had to have all of that. So just think about that. Personally, I have had wonderful experiences with the voice of God. I have even prophesied to people in the past, and he has spoken to me through visions, especially when it came to prophesying. And then I would ask him what it meant, and then I would hear him validate what it was that he was showing me. My first experience prophesying happened in 2019 around July or August. And I was praying for two women. and God began to give me visions about them. The first woman, I saw his hand marked with blood. He was putting his hand on the ground and sort of making this pathway for her to walk down. And I didn't know anything about what she was going through. I didn't know anything about these women, of what they were going through at the time. But I called her up and I was like, hey, I was praying for you earlier, and I see the Lord's hands setting out this path that he wants you to walk down. And she was like, oh my gosh, I was praying to God the other day, asking him, can he direct my steps? And I was like, well, he is doing it, girl. He is doing it. And then the second woman, he gave me a vision of these dominoes being lined up, and he pushed over a domino. And of course, it was a domino effect. And I was like, Lord, I have no idea what this means. Like, what are you trying to tell me? And he said, tell her that everything is getting ready to happen so fast for her. One thing on the heels of the other. And for the next few months to about a year or so, there was so much happening for her, like back to back to back to back to back. And so, it's really wonderful to have those experiences with the Lord, with being able to hear his voice, because even Paul says he wishes that we would all prophesy. It will prove to be so beneficial, not just in your life, but in the lives of those who you are around, when you can really start to decipher between God's voice and, the voice of the world or the voice of the enemy. So right now, what I want to do is kind of give you some practical tips on what I have found that helps to hear the voice of God better. Number one, God will not give you more than what you can bear. That being said, if he does speak to you, and I believe that he speaks to all of us because he wants us to know his voice. If he's speaking to you and you sort of get a hunch that that could be God, but you don't act on it right away, then it's showing him that he still needs some more work to do inside of you before he continues to speak to you more and more. I showed God that I can act, because when he told me to find out more about him, I got up right away and started doing that. And so after that experience, he began to speak to me more. And I would continuously keep believing, keep trusting, and keep acting. So he kept speaking. And for 5 years now, I have heard the voice of God every single day. And then the second practical guide I want to give you is by breaking down the word voice. So do you know his voice? V.O.I.C.E. V. Can you validate it? If you hear or think that you hear God speaking to you, can you validate it by asking yourself, does that sound like God? Does it smell like God? Does it look like God? Can you verify that with scripture that he speaks that way? Oh, does it occupy your mind? A lot of times when God speaks, it will be something that you really can't shake off, because it's going to sound differently than how you would speak to yourself or how you would view a certain situation. Is it insightful? Does that voice have a deep understanding? Does it have a great perception about something? If so, that's usually God. C, is it comforting? Now, when I first heard God speak, he sounded like water. It was this comforting water of a voice. It's like really hard to describe, but it was so peace feeling. But the more he spoke, the more he just sounded more like a regular voice. So the more you hear it, the less it will probably sound like water. It'll just start to sound like your second nature voice. And for something to be comforting, that means that it is serving to alleviate distress in you or grief in you. The chapter where he says, my sheep know my voice, has that scripture in it that says that the enemy comes to steal, kill, and to destroy, but I have come that they may have life. His voice has come to give you life, even though the enemy is trying to speak death over you. God is saying, this person is mine. I have seen God in a vision pick my chin up in the middle of me going through distress, and him speaking to me and saying basically to get up and keep going. Everything is going to be okay. So his voice should be very comforting. It should alleviate your distress. It should not be confusing. And then E, is that voice edifying? Is it providing moral or intellectual instruction for you? Overall, just keep in mind that God will keep you in perfect peace when your mind is stayed on him because you trust in him. Try to always find moments of stillness, even in the busyness of your day. I have really gotten into meditating on the word. I'm not talking about no type of new age stuff, nothing like that. I'm saying exactly as scripture says, meditating on his word day and night. I've gotten into that recently of just spending some time in solitude and silence and just working on breathing exercises and citing a scripture throughout the time that I'm sitting there. One of the scriptures that you should be citing in your meditation is, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. And the more that you are still and you know that he's God, the easier it's going to be to hear his voice. And so I want you to start praying every day and asking the Lord to remove any obstacles that could be standing in the way of hearing his voice. And do like the father of the demon-possessed son did in Mark 9:24, how he said, Lord, I do believe, help my unbelief, which means you do believe that God can speak, but help my unbelief that has this history of feeling like maybe you can't do it for me, even though you've done it for others. The more you pray that, the more he will begin to answer that prayer. He wants to speak to you. He wants his sheep to know his voice. He wants to be fully known by his sheep. He says, ask anything in my name and I will give it to you. Well, learning to hear his voice is asking it in his name. I pray that this video has brought some type of insightfulness to you hearing the voice of God. And I really pray that you will be able to hear his voice like I do on a daily basis, because it is a gift. By the way, I have a channel membership where I will be reading every chapter of my book, The Activated Word, and it will basically be live, which means I'm not going to be doing a lot of editing. You'll just be able to get to know me through these chapters. I will also be breaking down each chapter. We would do one video, for example, reading chapter 1, and then the second video breaking down chapter 1, and then so forth. I'm really excited about this membership. I already have the intro video up, as well as the chapter 1 reading video up if you want to check it out. The membership is only $2.99 to join, and to be honest, you are getting my book much cheaper than it would be on Amazon. The time that it will take me to read the book, you will have paid 30% less than what the book is actually priced on Amazon. Plus, I'm reading it to you and breaking it down, which is something I definitely wanted to do. So if you would like to sign up for a membership, go on my channel on your desktop, or put your phone in the mobile, not the mobile version, but the desktop version. Go to my channel and click the join button, and you will be able to see where to do everything right there. And I just know it's going to be so worth it for you. I know that you're gonna love it. You really are. Anyways, if you have not subscribed to this channel, please do not hesitate to hit that subscribe button, like this video if you found it helpful, and comment down below and let me know what your experiences are with hearing from the voice of God. I love you so much, and I cannot wait to see you in my very next video. Stay blessed.